On this episode of Law Weekly, we look at some of the issues trailing the recently passed Petroleum Industry Bill and the much talked about conference of the Nigerian Bar Association section on business law. My guest is the chairman of the section, Ayuli Jemide. Also showing on this episode of the program, highlights from the Lagos State Real Estate Regulatory Authorities Roundtable discussion on the incorporation of foreclosure law into the state's mortgage and property law, plus our recap of the top trending legal stories in the news. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Shola Sheyeli. Issues around the recently passed Petroleum Industry Bill remain very topical and is the starting point of my conversation with the chairman of the NBA section on business law. A highly regarded corporate and commercial lawyer, Jemide was named the Best Lawyer Nigeria 2013 by World Finance. He specializes in project finance, real estate, oil and gas, and public-private partnerships, to mention a few. I began the interview by asking his views on the PIB law.
Well, it was a very important bill, and the stakes were really high, because this is a bill that's trying to readdress, imbalances in the oil and gas sector. I think that the oil and gas companies would be against the bill, naturally, but national interest really, trumps, in the sense that this bill, if passed and well operated, is a bill that is really in the national interest.
Some oil and gas experts have described the PIB as a necessary legislation, but they think that it's coming a little too late for it to have any meaningful impact, especially because the world is moving away from fossil fuel. Do you share this view?
I agree with you that they're moving. So it's a journey. Now, whether that journey, will terminate early or it will materialize to a point where oil will become irrelevant in the next 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 years, my view is that, oil will still be around for a long time to come. Just think about it. There are over 1 billion passenger vehicles in the world, just passenger vehicles, right? It will take a while to transit. Think about the fact that there are probably over 70% of the world is undeveloped, right? So for a long time, right, people will still be transported with vehicles that need, the traditional energy, right? So, it will take a while. One of the ways to track thoughts is to find out what the investors are doing. Shell and the IOCs are renewing their oil mining leases. As of 2021, I think in May, Shell was renewing OML 118. If they thought that in 20 years, this industry will be dead, they'll be moving elsewhere.
Now let's talk about some of the controversies that are trailing the recently passed bill. Some major oil companies in Nigeria are complaining about taxes and royalties, and there's also the pushback against the right percentage due to host communities. How will you advise the National Assembly to handle these issues going forward?
Okay, so those are really two different things, and they are two conflicting things, right? Because traditionally, the fight of the host community and what the IOCs want have always been askew, right? So let's talk about the IOCs, right? And let's tell ourselves the truth, right? The IOCs have held Nigeria hostage when it comes to the oil and gas industry for God knows how many years, right? Do we know how much they spend to drill 1 barrel of oil? Do we know if the IOCs are already making a profit based on the contribution of government to the JV? We don't really know the stats, right? Do we know, if there are any monies that are unaccounted for? Recently, we had, issues where the government was saying, there were things unaccounted for, right? I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but there's no smoke without a fire, right? So the bottom line is, I think the PIB, if well implemented, is coming to address this, right? And like I said earlier on, the PIB is really in the national interest, and we should focus on that. The bottom line is, we have major players in the oil and gas industry, the multinationals and the IOCs, but there are more people. And if you look recently, you'll find that Nigerian companies who took over oil mining leases from the IOCs, have run their OMLs and have increased production. If you look at OML 29, they increased production from 30,000 to 70,000 and above. So at the end of the day, the government has to make up its mind whether it wants to stay with the national interest, and they have to be brave and courageous about this, because if the IOCs decide that the fiscal regime is not, favorable to them, they have an option, and we'll always get people who will invest in Nigeria. I'm definite about that.
Now, there's an ongoing dispute as to how much profits is due to the host communities. What are your thoughts on that?
First and foremost, I must tell you I'm conflicted. I'm from the Niger Delta. I'm from Warri North, and my community produces a lot of oil. But that said, the genesis of this is that the committee drafting the PIB first recommended 10%. The plenary session said no, 3%. Senator James Manager and the other senators from the Niger Delta tried to rally around to say, okay, maybe 5%. But I think we're at 3%, right? 3% is a lot of money. Even 1% is, right? And if you ask me, as someone from the Niger Delta, I will tell you 50%. I will tell you all of the money. But that said, I think beyond that, we should think about the implementation, even if it's 1% or 0.5%.
So it's not about the
figure? Well, the figure is important, right? But going beyond the figure, right, we should also think about the implementation. And the first question you ask yourself is whether derivation, since it was introduced, has really improved a lot of the community. We have the NDDC, the Niger Delta Development Commission. I mean, can we really say that, in the number of years NDDC has been in operation, and before that on PADEC, can communities say they have benefited, or is it a few people that got rich, right? So we should think about that. But there has to be a structure where we are sure that this money really helps to uplift the community, not to make a few people rich. It's something we need to monitor closely, and it's something that needs to be implemented properly, or else what was meant for good may end up for bad.
So I hear you saying, if well implemented. So I'm going to ask, what are your suggestions for implementation?
I always maintain that leadership is key. If you ask me to invest in a company, I will ask you, who are the shareholders? Who is the CEO? So they've set up all these commissions under the PIB, right? The important thing is to get the right people, who have the right mindset and who not only have the capacity to do the job, but, have the right vision and the right attitude, right? And if you get those kind of people, they'll get the job done.
Away from the issue of the PNIB, the National Assembly on Wednesday empowered the executive to borrow some billions to fund the 2021 appropriation bill amid serious concerns from Nigerians about sustainability and servicing of Nigeria's external borrowing. These fears, as expressed by the public, do you think they're justified?
Debt by itself is not really a bad thing, right? First and foremost, sometimes it's cheaper to borrow than to generate revenue. If you think about how much the Federal Inland Revenue Service will spend on overheads alone and how well they've generated revenue, it will just put it in context for you. The other thing we need to think about is that when people think about debt, particularly if it's something like sovereign bonds, right, they only know the total number that was borrowed, right? But they don't understand that what you need to service the debt over the next 20 years is just to pay the coupons, right? So we shouldn't be worried about paying the coupons. Nigeria will pay the coupons. What we should be worried about is whether we would have enough fiscal responsibility to have a sinking fund where we put money aside to pay the principal when it becomes due in 20 years or however the tenure is. And the last thing I would say is, for countries who borrow, the most important thing is the debt to GDP ratio, right? And when you think about it, even though we've borrowed a lot, we are not bad in terms of a debt to GDP ratio. We're not bad, right? Typical, economists will tell you that your debt to GDP ratio should stay somewhere around 60%, right? It should be below 60%, right? We're below 60%. I think we're in the 30s, right? But let's take a comparative look. You would find out that America is above 100%. Japan has the highest. They are over 200. And you wouldn't say Japan is doing badly, right? The most important thing is, what do we do with the money? If you put the money into productive activity that generates employment, rather than using it to pay salaries, right, then we'll be fine.
Leveraging the tech explosion is the theme of this year's NBA SBL conference, and the SBL conference have always been very popular. So let's talk about how tech is affecting the world of lawyers.
It's a conference that we've designed for non-lawyers to attend, and it's also a conference that we've designed this time around for lawyers to sit and listen. Because many times we come to these conferences and we speak to ourselves. But this time around we want to sit and let people talk, and we can learn. So there's a session about technology and legal practice, as one of the sessions. And we think that in the years to come, and it's already beginning to happen, artificial intelligence is something that's going to affect the income of lawyers. We also think that lawyers will be able to leverage on new networking tools, which are also based on artificial intelligence. If you notice, when you do a Google search, or you check for something on Instagram, the next couple of days you start getting advertisements targeted at that thing that you looked for, right? So there's a lot of artificial intelligence being developed that will help lawyers even with their networking and attracting clients and knowing the clients that are interested or clients that are in a particular line of business. So that's one aspect of it. We also think that lawyers will get more efficient. Technology is moving at a fast pace, and at a point in time, the agreements that used to take us, hours and days to put together, we'll be able to do it faster. We naturally assume that if we can, then perhaps the bills to the client should reduce. And if the bills reduce, we naturally assume that more people will have access to legal services. So you will get more clients on the curve rather than a few clients who pay you a lot, right? So there's a lot going around the technology and legal practice, and it's one of the things we want to discuss at this conference.
Finally, I want to put something in here for the young lawyers. A few days ago, the law school results were released, and we're going to have a couple of thousand more lawyers coming to the field. Where do you think that these lawyers will fit? And what advice do you have for young lawyers generally?
Well, thank you. I mean, that's a very good question, because there's always this debate as to whether we have too many lawyers in Nigeria. And I always maintain that no, we don't have too many lawyers. We just have too many people who think they don't need lawyers or don't know how to use lawyers. And then we have too many lawyers doing the same thing, right? So, on that basis, my advice to younger lawyers is, broaden your horizons, take a wider view about law than many of us did, right? There are new areas coming up in law. Technology and financial inclusion it's a new area. Lawyers who are focused on things like agriculture, healthcare, in such a way that, people who are involved with agriculture just know that this is your specialty. Some of those people don't exist. The key question is, what are you going to be known for at the end of the day, in 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years? What are you going to be known for? Are you going to be referred to as someone who is a lawyer? Or are you going to be referred to as someone who is a lawyer that has a given expertise and you are known for that? And I think that's where every single lawyer should be headed.
Now, away from the interview, the Lagos State government is keen to develop the real estate sector through proper laid-down regulations that would ensure that local and international investors are attracted and that the highest level of integrity is maintained. And this is one of the things that the Lagos State Mortgage and Property Law seeks to achieve. But to guarantee returns on investments in mortgages in the state, the government has proposed certain amendments to the law. We have details in this next report.
The Lagos State Real Estate Regulatory Authority, LASRERA, recently organized a roundtable discussion on the incorporation of foreclosure into the law.
Section 12 of the existing law.
At the discussion, the special advisor to the Lagos Governor on Housing, Mrs. Toke Benson Awoyinka, speaks to some of the benefits of the amendments.
Mr. Governor has consistently reaffirmed his commitment towards ensuring the provision of affordable and decent housing for the citizens of the great state, with a view to reduce to the barest minimum the prevailing housing deficit across the state. The vision is how to achieve professionalism and global best practices in the market. Lagos State Mortgage and Property Law aims to encourage the growth in the real estate sector and regulate the consumer loans for proper realization in the state. The law seeks to create a conducive environment for the protection of investments and investors in the mortgage industry and for the benefit of the people.
The Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Moyoshere Odigbanjo, says the amendment is now providing certainty in the law regarding sales of mortgage property and foreclosure.
The baby steps we are taking by proposing this amendment can ultimately lead to a revolution in the real estate industry if we get it right. Either two, foreclosure is available in Lagos State by virtue of case law or by virtue of what we call the common law. But this amendment in Section 39 codifies most of the case law developments in order to give confidence to the mortgagee who has given out his money that if there's a default, he'll be able to realize the security pledged without the undue stress that comes with litigation.
The law is pending before the Lagos State House of Assembly, and for the chairman of the State Assembly's Committee on Housing, the lawmakers are more interested in the innovations of the law which are in line with global trends.
The essence of it is to make the transaction between the mortgagor and the financial institution, to make it a seamless one, and more importantly to unbundle some of the opportunities that mortgagor or mortgagee can benefit. The more important one is the issue of voluntary surrender, that I know I cannot further fulfill the periodic repayment. Let me just surrender and a deed is made. the issue of court and other procedures have been cut off, and the essence of the house is to accommodate innovations into our laws.
The Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Company, is generally happy with the law. He believes the amendments will provide the enabling environment to attract investors into the real estate sector.
Foreclosure is not just something for the investors only, even for the borrowers. It engenders good credit behavior, which ultimately translates to lower costs for everybody in the industry. For the investors also, because they are now confident that there's a way out for them, they don't price that risk the way it is. So you see that jurisdictions with foreclosure laws have lower cost of funding than jurisdictions that do not have foreclosure law, because that risk is almost eliminated because there's a way out. So I'm super excited that Lagos State has decided to put this into law such that housing will become more affordable even to Lagosians with the establishment of this law.
Comments followed from different stakeholders, and the discussion was robust, especially on the need to tweak sections in the amendment to safeguard the development of the real estate sector in Lagos.
And just before we go, let's bring you a recap of some of the legal stories that made the headlines during the week.
We begin with a report that the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has ruled that the former Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, was ineligible for the National Youth Service Corps. Justice Taiwo held that she was not supposed to present herself for the youth service at the time of graduation because under the 1979 Constitution, which was in force at the time, she was not a Nigerian citizen, either at her graduation or when she turned 30. The court further held that the Constitution does not require her to present her first-degree certificate or any other one, including the NYSC certificate, to be appointed a minister. Still in Abuja, another federal high court has granted bail to the former registrar of the Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board, Professor Adedibu Ojerinde, in the sum of 200 million naira and two sureties in like sum. Justice Obiora Egwatu held that the sureties must be resident in Abuja and must show evidence of tax payment in the last 3 years. One of the sureties must be a professor who must provide a documented evidence of professorship, letter of appointment and staff identity card, while the other must be a resident within Abuja. The court subsequently adjourned the case to July the 22nd for trial. The Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, had arraigned the former JAMB registrar on an 18-count charge bordering on diversion of public funds to the tune of over 5 billion naira. Elsewhere in Abuja, the ECOWAS Court of Justice has ordered the federal government to pay a journalist, Agba Jalingo, the sum of 30 million naira as compensation for ill treatment and torturing him while in detention in Cross River State. The court said in its judgment that Agba Jalingo's arrest and his being chained to a deep freezer for about 34 days without a formal charge is against international human rights treaties, particularly the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, to which Nigeria is a state party. Jalingo, who is the publisher of Cross River Watch, was arrested over a report alleging that Mr. Ayade diverted 500 million naira belonging to the state. And we round off with a report that the Bayelsa State Judicial Panel of Inquiry on Police Brutality and Other Related Extrajudicial Killings, the chairman of the panel, while presenting the report, says the panel received 50 petitions and having considered same, it recommended the dismissal and demotion of some officers while also recommending that the sum of 21 billion naira be paid as damages. The state government has said that it will study the report and take necessary action.
And that's our program this week. Don't forget that you can find these and past episodes of the program on our YouTube page. I'm Shola Shayele. Thank you for watching and see you next week.